Good evening, everyone. My name is Kenny Francis. I am the Vice President of Indivisible New Orleans, and this is our last candidate forum of this election season. Thank goodness. This is my 11th forum when you put together the ones we did before. And so it's been a haul, and it's felt at times like I'm campaigning myself. And I can only imagine how tired the candidates are themselves. So I want to thank them preemptively for doing this forum. You guys are almost there, almost at the end. So tonight we're talking about District 7, the last district that we'll be talking about for the Orleans Parish School Board. You will see, if you've watched any of our previous forums, you will notice that the format will be the same as the other ones. And so we're going to have a beginning part where each of them gets to sort of introduce themselves and talk about their platform. They're each going to have about 4 minutes to do that. And then we're going to get to as many questions submitted as possible. I have some questions that I have prepared as I usually do, and I will be interweaving your questions. So if you have a question, please submit it. The bar at the bottom of your screen shows you where you can submit it on slido.com. Just enter into an event code District 7, and I will see it. Tonight we have 3 candidates. We have Jamar Wilson, we have Kayonna Armstrong, and Mr. Nolan Marshall as well. Mr. Marshall currently isn't with us. He was with us. I think he's having some internet issues. So we're going to hope that by the time we get through Jamar and Kayonna doing their opening parts, that he'll be back with us. I'm sure he's doing his best to get back on. It's the joy of 2020 where we have to meet virtually, and sometimes there's internet issues. And so with that, I'm going to get right into our time tonight, and starting by introducing the person to go first, I'm going to bring Jamar back. Hey, Jamar, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me this evening. Appreciate being here.
I'm going to take myself off the screen and give you your time.
Again, thank you, Kenny, and the rest of Indivisible NOLA for having me here this evening. My name is Jamar Wilson, and as you know, I'm running for Orleans Parish School Board District 7. I've been a community organizer, and I'm currently a special education administrator with over 10 years of classroom experience, both as a teacher and assistant principal, and now currently as a special education administrator. And I believe that it is truly my role to work alongside our community, ensure that all of our students attend great schools. I'm in this race and I'm running for office, not for myself, but for the kids and parents who I've worked alongside and with over the past 10 years. Knowing that the parents and kids who I've worked with, many of them are not happy with the current status quo with our school system, whether it is a lack of great schools for their kids to attend, to not feeling included in the processes that happen at the school board and even in their own schools. So that is really what pushed me to run, and is why I'm here this evening. I want to take a little bit of time to talk about my platform and some of the things that, as the school board candidate in District 7, that I will be focusing in on from day one. The first thing up is increasing our community involvement in decision making, making sure that we are reaching out to not only the people who normally show up to committee hearings, but reaching out to our wider community to ensure that NOLA Public Schools and OPSB is not operating in silo, but it feels like it is more of a community in decision making. That goes into also increasing transparency, not having conversations behind closed doors, having them out in front of the public at school board meetings. Going out and talking with the community and letting people know like where OPSB and NOLA Public Schools stands, and especially being clear about why certain schools are opening and closing, and why certain organizations are awarded schools. Also being clear with how the superintendent is held accountable and getting direct feedback from the community about the superintendent's progress, so that the community is helping to shape our perspective on the success or where the improvement needs to happen within our school district. I'm also am running to make sure that we change how we hold schools accountable. We need to move away from putting everything on high stakes testing and thinking about including parent surveys and teacher surveys, thinking about how we measure the health of a school and of an individual student holistically, not just about state test scores. We also need to think about diversifying the portfolio of schools for parents to choose from. Yes, this means that we need a system that respects parent choice, but that doesn't mean just being pro-charter schools. Parental choice includes ensuring parents who want to attend more neighborhood schools are able to attend those neighborhood schools. It means having more direct run OPSB schools for parents who want their children to attend those schools. Parent choice also means having more high quality schools and more diversity in schools, just fine arts schools, schools focused on certain special education services, schools focused on project-based learning. Our parents should have a plethora of high quality choices and not the current false choice that far too many of our parents go through. I also want to make sure that we are increasing funding and supports for mental health and trauma, special education, and ELL and ESL services, which continue to get cut from funding and support. And I see firsthand how much we need support from the district within those areas that go beyond what we are currently doing. Those special education students and our ESL population continues to lag behind, and we can't let that continue to happen. Those are some of the high level areas where I want to be focusing in on, and I look forward this evening to talking with you more about a few more issues.
Thank you, Jamar. And thank you for taking the hint that I came back and it was time to start wrapping it up. Looking forward to digging into a lot of that more specifically, given that we definitely have a bunch of questions that will give you opportunity to talk about those things more specifically. I'm going to put you back in the studio for a second, and then I'm going to bring Ms. Armstrong on. Good evening, Ms. Armstrong. How are you? Let me unmute you. You're muted. Try again.
Look, you were unmuting me, and I put myself back on mute. I'm here.
That's okay.
I've been ripping and running and campaigning and all that good stuff, but I'm here. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate you, as well as Indivisible, for extending this opportunity to share what I will bring to the table as the school board elect for Orleans Parish School Board for our district, for District 7. Hi, everybody. My name is
Thank you
Kayonna.
for being here with us, and I like it. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. Hi, everybody. My name is Kayonna Armstrong. I am running for Orleans Parish School Board District 7. I am a graduate of Eleanor McMain Secondary School, as well as a graduate of Southern University in Agriculture and Mechanical College with my bachelor's degree in criminal justice, my master's in political science, and I'm currently enrolled back at Southern to pursue my degree in public administration as far as my master's. What I will bring to the table as your school board elect, one, I'm from here. I have been a resident of Gentilly most of my life. Born and raised here in New Orleans. I am a proud product of the New Orleans public school system. I have matriculated through elementary, middle, and high, and am very, very, very proud of the schools that I have attended and graduated from. I come on the side of being a former parent advocate from Step Up Louisiana, as well as being inside of the school buildings teaching. I'm also a mother of a son who is in this district. And so the needs and wants, concerns, all those things that I have for my son, I definitely have for our children in District 7. I want our community, our students, our parents, our teachers to know that they have an ally in me. I am for direct run schools. I am for the local governance of our schools in our neighborhood by Orleans Parish School Board. I would definitely advocate for more transparency, honesty, as well as accessibility. Our community, our parents, our teachers, our students, they need to see us. We should not wait until a meeting starts for our community to know who we are. We actually need to be inside of these schools, talking with our teachers, talking with our parents, and even our students. Our students have a voice in this as well. Talk with them to see what their needs and concerns are, and create a survey or needs assessment for those needs, making sure that the funds that are allocated from our tax-paying dollars, from federal funding, from grants, all of these monies that are being pushed into our school board, we need to make sure that those funds are going in where they need to go in. I want and I'm going to ensure that we have the best quality education in the city of New Orleans, not just for District 7, but beyond. Like I said, I'm also a mother. I have a son that's in the school system now. And so I'm coming from all three perspectives of the view Like I said, I was a former parent advocate, so I will come to the meetings and be the voice for our parents, our teachers, and our students when they couldn't find one. I'm going to continue to be that voice. I'm definitely going to advocate as well for community input. We can't move. We shouldn't move. As school board members, we should not move without the community. Nothing, no policy being made, decisions being made, school closures, new charter schools, none of that should be made without the consent and input of our community. Another thing, being your new school board elect, we need to start supporting our state legislators. There's a bill that Dr. Bowie has been trying to push to gain local governance back towards Orleans Parish School Board. We need to be the face in that building when our state legislators are in session fighting for us. I am going to be that person. I appreciate this time. My name is Kayonna Armstrong. I am number 138 on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayonna. For those of you who may have just joined us, as I said at the top, Mr. Marshall was here, but he dropped off, I suspect, because he was having internet issues. We couldn't hear him when he was on here, and I'm assuming that he's trying to get back on. And so rather than hold everyone up, what we'll do is we're going to move right into the question and answers. And then if Mr. Marshall is able to rejoin us, he can do his statement at some point before we close. And hopefully he'll join us for as many questions as he can. So I'm going to bring Jamar back and we'll get right into the questions. And so like I told you guys when I was talking to you before we came on, what we're going to do now is we're going to go through a question and answer period with the rest of the time that we have. We're going to try to get to as many questions as we can. If you're watching this and you have questions, you can submit it. The information there at the bottom of your screen. I have some prepared questions I'm going to go through and be interweaving your questions in. I want to start with a question that was asked by a viewer at our last forum, at the District 6 forum, but I actually couldn't get to it because there wasn't enough time. But I thought it was a great question. We spent a lot of time talking about a lot of the issues and problems in the district, and we're definitely going to get to those. But I loved this question because I don't think that we do enough, particularly in a public policy sense, of really envisioning what we actually want rather than just talking about what's wrong and what we're trying to fix. And so what the first question I want to start with tonight is each of you are going to get 2 minutes. And I want you to answer this question. If you were you're a board, if you became a board member, you would be 1 of 7. So you'd be 1 vote out of 7. You obviously have to figure out how to work with the superintendent and with your other board members to actually get stuff done. And so it's not like you could get anything done completely on your own, but let's imagine for a second, let's pretend that you win this seat. And that means that for a term, you would be the monarch of the school board, meaning that you would have singular choice to make decisions. You wouldn't have to contend with a superintendent. You wouldn't have to contend with other board members. You would just get to decide what we're going to do. The only rules I'm going to give you is that we're not playing complete pretend. So it's not like you have all the money in the world. You have the same sort of regular financial, et cetera, and legal boundaries that you would have. You can't do anything illegal. But what would your vision for our districts and students be if you had a singular choice of deciding what we would do next? Would it be a charter district? Would it, like we have now, would it be a fully direct run district? Would it be a hybrid in between? What types of school offerings would you prioritize? What would you be focused on making sure is true for kids, given the resources you have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do some vision dreaming for me. And let's start with you, Kayonna, on this one.
Thank you, because I'm excited about answering this one. As far as my dream, when I am elected, as far as school board, it's simple. We've been under this charter system for far too long, and it's not working. We see that with our kids still being behind 30% of their grade level reading. We see that constantly with the schools closing down with no rhyme or reason as to why. We see that with abandoned buildings that we have that are just sitting there. We see this every day dealing with the discipline issues inside these charter schools. So if I had a choice, it definitely would be directly run. It definitely would go back to somewhat to what we had as far as New Orleans public system. You know, people want to compare and contrast post-Katrina, pre-Katrina, with not understanding that when the charter system started in New Orleans, it started with private entities that are from out of state coming in, deciding that they're going to take over. They're going to do what they want with our kids without any input, any say so, any consent from any residents, any members of the New Orleans community. And I don't see that as far as my vision. My schools will be directly run by school board members. It is our responsibility to ensure that each schools that we have under our district are running successfully. And if they're not, we need to take that opportunity to make the necessary changes and go into, like I said, going into the building, doing a needs assessment, doing a survey, actually talking and having that communication. Our teachers need stronger support. Our parents need stronger support. Our students need strong support, especially with the punitive practices that some of these charter schools have been implementing inside the schools. We need to change that. We need to change the entire narrative. So that's what I would do as far as being elected as school board.
Thank you, Kayonna. Same question for you, Jamar. What would be your vision that if you could singularly implement it, what would your vision look like?
Yeah, I like this question as well. I would have a hybrid system where the majority of schools will be direct run OPSB schools. I think there is a place for parents and for some charter schools to exist. Charters who are high performing, not based off of just a state test score, but that we locally decide how we actually measure our schools. I think that's a big piece of this puzzle as well, is that right now, we currently measure our schools based off of what the state tells us from their state test scores. And we actually need local decisions around how we actually measure and hold our schools accountable. So again, just on like the general governance lens, I would be in favor of hybrid, with the majority of them being direct run, with some charters as well. I think when we think about going deeper into the policy level, I definitely agree with Ms. Armstrong around the discipline practices, and really making sure that we are first taking cops out of schools and we're actually investing money into social workers, mental health supports, trauma supports. We know, a lot of us know the stats around how much trauma that unfortunately our students in our schools have experienced, and how little supports that they receive in schools and outside of schools to deal with that, to be able to show up to schools. So I would want to make sure that we are increasing our funding and supports to make sure that our kids can show up as themselves, and that our schools are actually using restorative practices, and that suspension and exclusionary practices are being eliminated from our schools. I think as well, we have to think about more than just our K through 12. We got to go younger. We got to go pre-K4, pre-K3, and think about how we actually create a continuum, so that when kids are entering into kindergarten, that they aren't entering already behind, but we're catching kids at pre-K3, pre-K4, ensuring that they are those kids are able to be in OPSB schools, learning from OPSB teachers, and making sure that our kids have as much of an equal footing as any of their peers, no matter of their socioeconomic status or their availability to get into a very few select pre-K seats. And I think if we're able to do that, we're able to expand who we're actually serving in our district at a younger age. We will be able to see a lot better results and a lot better future opportunities for our kids.
Thank you for that. I want to go next to touch on something that you both brought up in your opening statements, where you talked about community involvement. I don't think it's a controversial statement to say that our community feels like they're not heard in the processes that our school board currently undergoes. So I want you guys both to talk to me about what does family engagement and community engagement look like under an administration that you're helping leading? How would you go about trying to better engage families in the decision-making processes for what's going on in our schools and the policies that you're setting as a board? And then beyond just the families that are serving, that our schools are serving, the greater community at large. Because I think as someone, as you guys both know, I taught in the district and have been involved in the district for quite some time since I moved to New Orleans 10 years ago. And I think there's often a disconnect where people talk about the parents specifically, but like we all pay taxes. Like the school district is about the whole community. Like obviously parents are extremely important, but like our community members, whether they have kids or not, their opinions matter too. And so I wanted you to talk about those two specific communities. Also, like how do we better engage parents in these processes, and also just for community at large, whether they're a parent or not, whether their kid is enrolled or not, how do we better engage them in, and what would you do differently than what's happening right now? Because you went first last time, Kayonna, I'm going to go with Jamar this time.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think starting off with, we don't see our school board members. We don't see them at community events. We don't see them at community organizations, neighborhood association meetings. We don't currently see them at schools, engaging with parents and teachers. So first step is you simply have to be visible. You have to go out and actually talk to people in the community, not just when a decision needs to be made, but proactively. It can't just be grabbing parents at the end, putting them on a committee, saying like, hey, we want to do this. We have all the ideas already. Can we just get your rubber stamp? No, it means actually going out, engaging them early, and making sure that we have actual systems and structures that go beyond just like the typical parents. I know one thing that we do, one thing that I've put a lot of emphasis on at my school is like going out and talking to parents who don't normally show up to events, to get their perspective, because there's a reason why they're not showing up, and we need to understand why. And as a school board member, and as a school system, we need to be engaging with all of our parents to get their perspectives. I think when we think about our wider community, a lot of the similar things apply. We have to go out and show up into those places, and then also invite community organizations in, and just people who don't have parents into this process. It can't continue to be this siloed process. We have to have community businesses involved in what's happening in our schools, in collaboration with NOLA Public Schools and our actual schools. It can't just be these individual silos trying to do things. We need the school board and the school system to take the active role and lead, and actually bring the community into these spaces, and stop being so exclusionary with the community and seeing it as like an add-on instead of a central part of what we're doing.
Thank you for that, Jamar. Same question for you, Kayonna.
I share the same sentiments with Mr. Wilson. The only thing is, we are New Orleans Public Schools. We will always be New Orleans Public Schools, to me. It's no discredit to no lapse, but again, I'm a proud product of the New Orleans public school system, and that's foremost. That's what I will forever call it. Now, speaking on parent engagement, again, I'm coming from that personal side of coming into school board meetings, not only advocating for a parent, but coming in myself as a parent, wanting to express my concerns on things that are either on the agenda or even not on the agenda, that should be on the agenda, that the school board just blatantly refuses to address. We need to, first of all, gain that trust, because the reason why we're in this mess now is because of the loss of trust with parents and even with community stakeholders. As school board members, we are public servants who are to gain the trust of our community, almost like a buy-in. And so with that parent engagement, you have to remove the things that are blocking. And the things that are blocking is these individualized charter management organizations that are coming in, doing what they want, when they want, how they want, and are blocking the most important access to the child, which is the parent. So a lot of things that Mr. Wilson spoke of, I do agree with. We definitely need to create that space for the parent invite, whether it be a community event, a school event, where, during registration, a school may host like a fair or something where parents can come in and do a tour, and even students. We have to create that space for for parents to come in and trust us. The same way with our greater communities. We have to, again, like Mr. Wilson say, be visible, not show up for a photo op, not show up just because. You want to show up because you genuinely care, you are genuinely sincere, and you want to help your parents and your community members. Just that simple.
Thank you, Kayonna. Okay, so our next question that we're going to get into is, I want to talk about authorizing priorities. And if you guys would bear with me for a second, I want to give a little background for folks who may not be super familiar. A thing that I try to do is that, like, I worked at the district and I worked as a teacher, and so like these things are all second nature to me. But I think one of the things we don't do a good enough job for our community is explaining exactly what the system that we currently have is, even as we try to change it or keep it the same. So one of the things that happens in our district is because we are currently an all charter district, where charter schools get contracts with this board to run a school. There's a thing called authorizing priorities, where the district decides based upon a board vote, here are the types of things that we're looking for in a charter application. So think about it as like a job application. Think about it as the school board writes a job application that says, if you want to get a contract from us to run a charter school in our district, here's like the skills and qualifications and the offerings we want you to have. And that's the board's responsibility to set that vision. So I want you to talk about what your authorizing priorities are, given that like if you win this seat, one of the things that you would be responsible for is crafting that vision of what are the types of offerings that you think that we need in our city. Jamar, I'm going to start with you specifically on this one, because you mentioned in your opening statement about how you feel that parents have false choice and don't really have a diversity of choices. So I want you to talk about what would your authorizing priorities be then?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. Far too many of our schools all look alike. There are very minor differences between them. Many of them are in the same curriculum, focus on the same types of things. Getting kids to and through college is like the end all be all. And a lot of the additional things that were happening pre-Katrina in our schools don't show up. Many schools had to fight to get bands back into the schools, and that's actually quite unacceptable. When we look at what's being authorized in a school, we got to go beyond just saying, all the metrics around state test scores and achievement. Those are important. We obviously need to be educating kids and make sure they are achieving. However, we need to be thinking about there need to be certain schools where we're saying, hey, we want these amazing fine arts programs. Every school is not going to be possible to have a top of the line fine arts program, but we should be looking at and thinking about how many of those types of schools we want to authorize. How many types of schools do we want to authorize who are able to specialize in certain types of special education to provide even more intensive services? We have some types of those schools already, but we need more. We know that our kids deserve more and they need more types of schools that do that. We also, as we authorize, need to be putting in things such as no exclusionary practices, where we say, yeah, if you're going to be an authorized school here, you have to actually use restorative practices, and we're actually going to support you to do that. It can't just be something that we kind of tack on the back end. It needs to be very clear that that is what happens when you're a school in our system and in our district, is that you have to actually use those practices, and that we're going to be holding you accountable, not to be suspending and expelling kids away from your school. And I think the last thing is an authorization as we look at the actual curriculum, and we say that you have to be using a curriculum that has been proven that is actually culturally relevant. The district needs to look at the experts and come up with like what that criteria would be, but we cannot continue to have curriculum that shows up in our kids' faces every single day that does not honor and respect their history and the history of the community.
Thank you, Jamar. And I want to pause here. Mr. Marshall, can you hear us? Are you with us?
I'm sorry for the delay. Just as we were getting started, the internet went out on me and I had to leave that location and go to another location so that I could have internet. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Thank you. That's okay. We can hear you now. Can you hear me? I could hear you then. Can you say something else? I can see if I can hear you.
It is very scrambled. I hear every other word.
Okay. So here's what we're gonna do is I'm gonna put the questions when it's your turn in the private chat, because we can hear you fine. Kayonna and Jamar, if you bear with me for a second. Okay, so Kayonna, I'm going to give you your 2 minutes to answer the same question, and then Mr. Marshall, your 2 minutes to answer the question. I'll put it in the chat for you.
Seeing as though that we should. Wait, you muted me or you unmuted me? Now you muted.
Sorry about that. That was my fault. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I was like, what's going on? As far as how I feel about authorizing things, we shouldn't be authorizers. Here's why. Um, we shouldn't go into looking into a new charter system, looking into being an authorizer, trying to mandate what should be, what shouldn't be, until we look into the tools we have now. I would do a performance audit as far as the schools that are here now. From the ones I would support, I'm sorry. Now I would do the audit, but it would be backed up by Dr. Joseph Bowie. He also has another Senate bill that requires a performance audit to be done on all the schools from 2005 until now. In that audit, you will get an opportunity to analyze and identify things that worked, that didn't work with the schools, and those schools that actually were performing well, not anything that's been falsified or manipulated. Those schools that actually have been doing well, you're going to implement that into the schools that are not as successful. So that's what I would do in that case of being an authorizer. As far as mentioning about our music, our arts program, every school should have that, because before Katrina, every school had that. Every high school had a band. Every high school had art, theater, something that our children can get into and be off the street. Those things have been stripped away. So I will be bringing that back, as well as partnering up with programs that are like the same mind, like ideas. Instead of going to third party, you need to do insight right inside of your buildings. Yes, we do need more counselors, social workers for the mental awareness piece. But as far as authorizing anything and creating a new platform, a new charter, we can't even do that without the consent of, and that's the charter law. You cannot open a new charter system of any kind of sort, or I'm sorry, not system, school, without the consent. That means getting permission from parents and from community stakeholders. And that's the issue that has been going on in these 8 years of our incumbents in this school board, that they have been moving without the consent. They've been manipulating things, changing things around without the consent, without the knowledge, without the invites of our community. And so that needs to change immediately. We don't need that.
Thank you, Kayonna. I'm gonna have to stop you there
Yeah.
because your time is up. I hope that Mr. Marshall can see the chat and see the question. We're gonna try it. Mr. Marshall, can you see the question in the chat so that you can answer? I have no idea if you can hear me or not. Mr. Marshall, if you can hear me at all, can you check the chat? The private chat has the question for you, because we can hear you when you talk.
Oh. Okay. The question is, what are my authorizing priorities will be for the next 4 years if you win the race? Yes, I know what they would be. Can you see me and hear me okay? I can't tell if you can see or hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay. My priorities would be to try and get schools that go from pre-K4 through high school, so that we can have charters that have a program of full development for the kids. I mean, that's my priority, where they can start from babies and control the everything, values and character development to exploratory curriculum during the middle school years to help them find out their interest and teach them the things that they need to know about life in terms of parenting skills, financial literacy, all of the things that they're going to need to know as an adult, so that as they begin to make decisions for themselves, they make decisions with the knowledge of what they're going to need later on, give them courses in career education so that they'll understand what this whole world has for them, so that they can begin to develop a passion for the work that they want to do in life and where they want to make their contribution. So when they get to high school, they'll find high school much more meaningful. And then we can direct them to different courses in high school that further gives them the experience and understanding of what they want to accomplish in life. It's sad what we consider a quality education to pass the test, when they need so much more for a full and life and a successful life, to develop the people we need to be the futures of this country. What's needed to make this democracy work is a lot more than what they're getting. And we need to be developing people that we want to live next door to us, that we want our sons and daughters to marry, that have a sense of responsibility and take care of the responsibility for their families and themselves. They need a lot more than what they're getting out of our present education. And to have school kids educated in one place, K through 8 in one place, and then have to go to a high school that's not in sync with what they see K through 8 is not appropriate in my mind. The models that really work go through K through 12, where they control the full development of the child. And
thank you, Mr. Marshall. I'm gonna have to stop you there.
Like to see happen.
So the next question, and Kayonna, we're gonna start with you on this one. There's been a conversation happening in our city about duplication of services, potentially, where we have a system where the charters operate the operations of many functions of their schools independently at their individual sites. Things like busing, things like special education evaluation and service provision, things like facility management, things like the HR practices, hiring and termination of staff, etc. There's a conversation that's been going on for a while about what things belong at the control of individual school sites and what things should be centralized. There's arguments made that if you centralize certain functions, it can make them much more efficient and cost effective. And potentially there's arguments also made that you can provide better quality for certain services if you centralize them. And so the question here, and again, Mr. Marshall, still don't know if you can hear me. I will be putting the questions for you in the chat. Is what functions, if any, should be centralized for quality and economy of scale at the district level? And what would you put? And if you want to centralize some functions, which ones would you be pushing for if you win this race? So starting with you, Kayonna.
Thank you. As far as your question, we should go back to a centralized system as far as a school board. Why? Because we would not have what we had during the pandemic, where the school board made it aware that we would go into virtual learning, but yet individual boards on these charter management organizations said otherwise. If we go back to a more centralized system, then the policies implemented, the direction that the school board would go as far as making decisions, as far as even during a crisis where we would have a task force to deal with that, then the schools that are under our district have to follow that mandate. We have to realize that the decisions being made affect the entire community. And so when you have these individualized powers going on, you have frustration, you have confusion, you have strife. So I will put in place a more centralized system where the hiring process, as far as the school board, we would have a human resource department for that. When it comes to staffing, that will be made upon the decision of the school board, but also given the option to that principal. We should not have CEOs managing schools. We should have principals managing schools. And I do believe a more centralized system would be cost effective, because that means our schools will be back as far as being neighborhood schools. That will cut down the cost of these excessive contracts with these different buses. And those funds from those buses can definitely be moved into the schools that need those resources the most.
I need to ask you a follow-up question here, and Mr. Marshall and Jamar, I'll give you both a little extra time, just because obviously Kayonna is going to speak again. What you've just advocated for there is a centralizing of all functions under a fully centralized district run. A question that I need you to answer for us and be specific about is, given that this board cannot autonomously make a decision to completely district run schools, what instruments would you use to start to do this process, given that it's not like the OPSB board can just take a vote and say, all right, we're running all the district schools now?
Right. Well, one thing I would do, there's this Act 91. We got to get rid of it. We have to repeal it. In place of Act 91, we need to back up our state legislators. Our Louisiana State Senator, Dr. Bowie, has presented a bill that the current school board members definitely should have been in the session to support, that given the authority back over, meaning the autonomy has been removed and has been placed back where it needs to be placed. And so had that Senate Bill 42 had been approved, then we would not have the issue of going back to a centralized system. So in order to do that, we need to remove and repeal Act 91 and replace Act 91 with the Senate bill that Dr. Bowie proposed, that gives that leadership, that authority role back over to school board.
Thank you for that clarification. Jamar, over to you with the same question about what functions, if any, do you believe should be centralized for quality and economy of scale, and which ones would you be advocating for, if that's a position that you're taking?
Yeah, one area that I've seen firsthand is special education. We definitely need to think about how we can centralize more of our special education services. At a minimum, the evaluation process, first identifying those students, both from an overdiagnose, what we've seen some schools do, to also an underdiagnosing of individual kids, which we've seen schools do. With having that being centralized and having experts being brought in, making sure and having accountability over the centralizing of that special education, that we have really thoughtful and smart folks doing that process, we should have much better, one, just evaluations of kids in special education, and then two, the actual service provision. As we think about how we can be strategic in using our resources, we know that kids in special education already get increased funding to schools. And so we need to be actually accountable and being transparent in how those funds are being used. And that will be a whole lot easier with the centralization of special education services within our district. Transportation is also another area where I would love to see some centralization. We've already seen some charter CMOs start to move in that direction of trying to combine some of their transportation services to reduce their costs. If we went to a more centralized model for transportation, I think we would see a big reduction in costs. That could also lead to shorter bus times and just more money that we can put into other places within our school system and school district. And I think the last place I think that centralization will be key is that facility management, especially when we think about COVID and like saying if a school can be open or closed. We know that decision, a lot of that is made up to the current CMO. And we need the school system needs to be able to say, and have clear criteria for if a school can be open or closed. That should not be left up to individual schools. That we already know that literally we can't, as I've said before, we can't paint a wall in a school building without getting authorization from the district. Doesn't make any sense that the district wouldn't have full facility management, including if schools are opening or closing, in regards to like COVID reasons.
And I'm assuming also weather.
And what, yeah.
Thank you for that, Jamar. Mr. Marshall, you're up. I hope that you can see the question.
The question is, what services would we want to centralize?
Yes.
Is that the question?
If any.
Okay, all services that don't aim specifically to students, busing, accounting, facility management, cafeteria, food services, all of those. The only ones that I would really like the educators to have to worry about and do would be the experiences, programming, and curriculum that the students have. Other than that, all of those services could be done well and more efficiently at the district level. I believe the policy of the system is that we are asking educators to step out of their role and become managers, marketing agents, and doing all of those other business-like functions that they haven't really been trained to do. Some exceptional leaders do it and do it all well, but for the most part, educators were trained to be just that, educators, and to have to do all the additional services require them to learn skills that they shouldn't have to. The district could do all of those functions now. Can we make that happen? I think over time, common sense will come to bear, but as a friend of mine says, having sense isn't too common. So I feel like we'll eventually get there, but it'll take some time to demonstrate the cost savings, to demonstrate that the district can do those functions for schools. Some will come back sooner than others, but I feel that eventually they all will be taking advantage of that. Transportation, all of those things should be done centrally. That's what I believe. How do we make that happen in this environment with everything being controlled by the state legislature is something that we have to work towards. But those are my beliefs. I believe we focus too much on those kinds of things, and it would distract from the experiences, the programming, and the curriculum that our children need to grow and become the people we need them to be. The focus should be on the children. We talk too much about adult issues and adult concerns. We don't talk enough about children. That's frankly why I continue to do this job, drive that conversation to the children. All of those functions could be done by the district and done well. I don't have anything else about the subject.
And Mr. Marshall, if you look, you're going to start next on you're going to start first on the next one. I'm going to say the question for the other two of you, but I hope Mr. Marshall can see. The question is, Jamar and Kayonna, is about how can we better support ELL students, as it's a growing part of our population in New Orleans. Something I said on a different forum is even just when I moved to New Orleans 10 years ago, we were below 10% in terms of like the number of children that identify as needing ELL services, and we're closer to 20 now. And we are not doing a great job of supporting that community, and we need to do a better job. So I want to hear your thoughts on that. And also something that we have for a very, very, very long time needed to do a better job with in New Orleans is providing services for students with exceptionalities. And I want to hear your thoughts about how we better serve those students. I'm hoping Mr. Marshall saw the question, and we're going to let him go first if he did.
Well, I believe every school should have translators at the school site to work with the parents and to work with the community that supports the kids. And this is I think was lacking in a number of places, that they don't have full-time translators in the school to work with those parents and students. They should be given additional technology that allows for them to have translation and on an ongoing basis, so that everything that's spoken to them is translated for them to speed the process. I mean, we don't take advantage of technology near as much as we should, but those are two things that come to mind that we should implement as soon as possible, and work to give the schools the additional resources that they need to accomplish that. That's where I stand.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. This time I'm going to go over to you, Kayonna, second. What What are your thoughts on how we can better support ELL students and students with exceptionalities?
Equity, simple as that. We need to provide equitable resources for our ELL, for our children with exceptionalities, especially our gifted, who are being very much disserviced. We need to implement programs, resources, translators, all that we need to seek better and provide stronger support for our ELL students, for our SPED students, and for our gifted students. We need to implement those programs right back into the schools. Sorry about, I don't know if I'm speaking low. It sounds like I'm speaking low. But yeah, our students are already going into the school with less. And here we are providing them with less. You know, how are our students supposed to thrive? How are they supposed to be successful when the resources that are right there, that are just right there in their reach, are not being given? Because the funds are being misappropriated. They're not being properly placed where it needs to be. So if we get the funds that we know that we're getting from federal, we know that we're getting from Title I, we know that we're getting from our taxpaying citizens, allocate those funds into the programs to strongly support our ELL students and students with exceptionalities, then we can see better results in the end.
Thank you, Kayonna. Over to you, Jamar. And Jamar, before you go, I just want to say for all of you, I just figured out that I can put the questions up on the screen so you can all see it, so that we won't be confused, because we know Mr. Marshall's having those difficulties. So I'm going to put the next question at the bottom while you're talking.
Got it. Definitely agree with most of what's already been said. Requiring translators on campus, that's a bare minimum. The fact that that's not a policy already is inexcusable. That has to happen. Our ELL population is just going to continue to grow within our city, and we need to make sure that our parents can feel welcomed and having the language supports they need to actually show up to school and advocate for their kids. We have money that is dedicated to special education and ELL. It's not enough. Even with if we were to uncover and be very clear about where that money is going, we still need to be advocating for more because we know that that money has just been slowly increased. But the fact is, we have kids with all types of different needs, whether in the gifted program or just students with exceptionalities, and they require a lot of supports. And we need to be advocating both to at the state level to make sure that our kids in New Orleans are getting the equitable funding that we know that they deserve, that they right now are not getting. And when I think about what then we do on the support level, right now there's not a lot of support from the district, especially special education. Right now, as a special education administrator, I can tell you my support from the district is like the district comes, they review 6 of my special education files a year, and they say, hey, you gave services. They don't look at the student evaluations. They don't think about and be holistic and thinking about, is this kid actually do the services that they have? Are these the right services? Are they the best services for a kid? How are these things actually being carried out? The district doesn't do that level of accountability and support to schools. And so we actually, honestly, from a district level, I don't think they have a good idea right now of the true needs and like the true levels of what we need from our kids with disabilities. So we need the district to actually step up, and actually the school where I will be pushing our district to have better special education supports and more experts who can actually provide that expertise to schools and ensure that our kids with exceptionalities are getting everything they need to be successful, along with our students inside of ESL programming.
Jamar, I'm going to come right back to you to start first in this next question. As you guys can all see, it's at the bottom of the screen now. What are your thoughts on school closure? Is it an appropriate intervention? Should we enact a different process for responding to failing schools? If so, what is your ideas?
School closure is not appropriate. There is no reason that we should be closing schools in our city. Because first we have to back up before we get to a school closure. We have to get to thinking about what happens when a school is starting to struggle, and we need to think about like what it means when we say a school is struggling. We need to be clear about what that criteria is. But say we have agreed upon the criteria for a school that is struggling, the district needs to be even more proactive. It can't wait until a school is an F school or a D school for multiple years before they come in and say, hey, here are these extra supports. We need to be proactive. Our kids don't have time to wait for 1 year, 2 year, 3 years of a failing school or a D school before the district jumps in with additional supports and interventions. Those have to happen proactively. So we have to first know and understand where our schools are performing, and then the district has to be ready to provide extra funding, because that's what equity is. It's saying, hey, we know this school has not been as successful. Let's make sure we get equity over there. Let's make sure they need extra money for certain types of support. Let's make sure that happens. Do they need extra personnel? Let's make sure that happens. Whatever it is, the district needs to provide that support and give that guidance to the school to make sure that we don't have failing schools.
Thank you, Jamar. Mr. Marshall, you're up. I think we lost Mr. Marshall. Oh, is he there? Mr. Marshall, can you hear us?
I heard that.
So great. If you can hear us, the questions at the bottom, go. You're up.
I see. Am I supposed to be? I can't.
Your internet was doing so well before. What happened?
Listen, we shouldn't have any failing schools. Of course, this whole premise of charter schools is based on us that they can educate our kids and educate. When they prove that they can't, we cannot allow them to continue if they're not doing it successfully. So we have to transition. School is not an option. Those kids can't be just dispersed and we leave a vacant building. Some educator that has a track record of well should be allowed to that building. So closure, positioning a successful operator is the right answer. However, we should not allow schools to get to the point any more supports in place to help. I want to go back to the other part of the question, and I believe that every kid should have an IEP, whether they're exceptional or they're disadvantaged or whatever. Every kid should have an IEP, and we should them for that kid to reach its full potential. If a kid is behind, give them the extra supports to make the progress that they need. If they're advanced, then they didn't need to be pushed and challenged. So we should each individual kid work. I've seen in Texas and San Diego, they're doing these things very well, and we should be doing like can't use the technology independent study that can make the progress that they need on an individual basis. Every school should have a advanced curriculum so that an A or B school should be according to their ability to have advanced placement classes, etc. And it should be from kindergarten all the way through gifted programs. Some call it gifted programs. I call it catering to the child's needs and making sure that they're being pushed and living up to their full potential.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Kayonna, over to you.
I definitely do not think school closures are appropriate. It's interesting that the incumbent would mention his disdain about failing schools when right now, currently in District 7, there's about 7 to 8 uh, failing schools of B's and F's. The district has had over 42 school closures in the 8 years this current school board members have served their term. Um, so no, I definitely do not think it is appropriate. What should we do differently? We definitely should do a needs assessment first and foremost, and do it in the early stages, because each of these schools that are under these charter management organizations have a contract that they're under, and it's a certain amount of time that they're under this contract before it is determined whether or not they will be renewed or closed. So therefore, before it gets to that point, there should be a quarterly, maybe a fiscal check-in with the schools to ensure that what's going on as far as resources, as far as curriculum, that those things are being put in place so that the school can continue to thrive. So that's one thing I would do. Another thing I would do is, like I said, provide a set of goals, like an improvement plan, and have that improvement plan for like maybe the next 3 years. As far as extending the contracts of our teachers, we have a high turnover rate of teachers because of short contracts. They expect teachers to make this miraculous turnaround when it comes to these test scores, when in fact, as far as growth, it takes about 3 to 5 years for a teacher to grow into their craft of teaching. So I definitely will extend the length of their contracts. As far as equity, is to fill in the gap of resources that are in need for those schools, no matter the gender, race, income, any of that. So as far as speaking of equity, again, if we do an audit on the schools that we have now, and we look into the data into that, we can identify and analyze what is working for those schools that are really succeeding, and try to implement that into the schools that are not as successful. And again, doing a needs assessment, you have to be visible as a district leader. You have to be visible. So how can I know what my school needs if I never go in to check in? So those are things I have as far as ideas coming in as your school board elect.
Thank you, Kayonna. And Kayonna, I'm going to come right back to you for the last question. Before we get into it, I just want to thank all three of you for your time. Thank you for putting yourself forward for public office. It's a big opportunity and responsibility in our community, and I thank you personally. I thank you for running for public office. It's not easy to put yourself out there. Also, running a campaign is not easy. So I hope that you can get some sleep over the next 2 weeks, and you're almost there. So our last question tonight, before I let you all go, is what do you believe separates you from your opponents and makes you the best candidate to represent District 7? What's unique about you compared to your other two folks?
Starting with me? Okay, one, again, I'm from here, born and raised. I'm a mother. Again, I'm coming in from that perspective, as well as a parent advocate and a teacher. I'm invested in what is best for our children. I'm not in the profit of business. I'm in the business of our children. So that's what separates me from the incumbent and from the challenger. I am a pro educator, and so I am all about input of our community. I am never going to move without that input as far as our community stakeholders, our teachers, our parents, our students. We need to bring PTOs back and PTAs back in every school site. We need to bring unions back at every school site to strongly support our teachers and our parents. We need to provide programs for our students to participate in, not clubs, actual programs that are beneficial for our children. We can no longer be on this spinning wheel of thinking that things are going to work, going back to the old. It's time for a change, and that change is right now, and that's what I'll be bringing in, coming as your school board elect. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayonna. Thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. Jamar, your last word on this one.
Yeah, thank you for having me here tonight again, Kenny and Indivisible New Orleans. The thing that separates me the most is that I'm the one that has the 10 plus years of experience working in education. whether it's as a teacher, assistant principal, or overseeing a special education program that has had tremendous results with kids who have disabilities. I have that firsthand knowledge of what it takes to actually be successful in our schools from an educator lens. With that experience comes understanding as well, and understanding of the policy, understanding how when the school board makes a poor policy decision, how that then shows up in a school, and making sure that as a school board member, I would not be making those same policy decisions, because I know that if we choose to do such thing as like closing a school, I know what that does to a community, what that does to kids, because I see when they have come to my school from a closed school, how detrimental that has been like to their potential progress. So just knowing and understanding how schools work and operate, and being able to bring that into the school board level, I think was kind of like the biggest thing that differentiates me from my opponents. And as well as pushing forward to ensure that our schools are being transparent, and our districts being transparent, and we are leading with equity and community at the center, and not allowing other factors to dictate what happens in our schools. Our teachers should be leading the way. Our kids and their parents should be leading the way for what happens, and I will be pushing and advocating for that as the next school board member in District 7.
Thank you, Jamar. And last word over to you, Mr. Marshall. Yes, you're up.
Experience. I've raised 2 generations of kids. I've been a PTA president. I've organized friends of organizations at various schools. I've worked on school improvement plans. I've served on the MAC Ed Fund Board, the Partnerships in Education, the Urban League Board, and the Chamber of Commerce over the country, and educators about what's working and what's not working. Experience. I was in the room when the Pat Taylor plan was brought to the Urban League, and I told them then why it was not going to be supposed to do. I sat in the room when they brought high here and told them why it wasn't going to work. I can get Mark Sternberg on the phone with the Walton Foundation, because he understands that I know this community. I know the students. I know the parents. I've lived all over in these schools for 40 years. What doesn't work? Need to be on the board. Drive the focus in the conversation to the children. What we need to be doing for the children. We're not doing nearly enough. And the only way we're going to do that is to build bridges between the school system and City Hall, with NORD, United Way, LSU Ag program, all of these working with us in the school, advocating for Office of Community Resources to work with outside agencies and people to bring those services and things in to our children needed. Everybody talks about equity situations, but what we've created is exaggerate the equity. Charter schools allow for to go to the haves, fewer resources going to the have-nots. So it's a system that has a flaw. How do we correct that flaw? It takes experience and knowledge and getting people to the table that will listen. Everybody can't do that. You have to have a voice that people are willing to listen to. Equity is something that we need to do it based on the child's needs. We need to satisfy their unmet needs, and we need to bring in partners to do. That's the way you attack equity. So just continue to have unmet needs. There will be potential. We have to work with them. We can take some of our buildings and turn them into affordable housing. We can take some of our and make it available for temporary housing if a family finds itself due to some unforeseen circumstances. We can provide temporary housing for. There's many things we can do, but we cannot district. We must do it in partnership with other agencies.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. I'm gonna have to stop you there. That's the end of your time.
These things and structure these things with others.
I have no idea if you can hear me.
And I'm willing to continue another 4 years doing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Thank you, Kayonna. Thank you, Jamar. Thank everyone for joining us and for your questions, for submitting them. We're at the end of our time. Thank y'all for being with us through 7 of these school board forums, multiple DA forums, also being with us through forums for the judgeships. We appreciate all of y'all joining us and being engaged in this process. From what we've seen, we have record numbers of early voting so far, and please keep it up. Like, if you do nothing else, just vote. At this point, just go and vote. And thank you guys for all of this. And this is our last forum, and we'll be back next election season. Have a good evening, y'all.